My first day home from prison. That's what we're going to talk about in this video and on this episode of the Pen and the Shank, the most unusual and unique crime and prison channel experience on YouTube. We're going to talk about the anticipation of me waiting for my parents to arrive to pick me up from being released from prison so that I can start my new life. We're going to talk about the range of emotions that I had experienced. We're going to talk about the flood of uncertainty that clouded my mind as I sat there waiting to be released. And if you know anything about prison, it's called the release date that you get released in prison. The inmates and even the officers and the staff refer to a prison release as a 1201. The reason they call it a 1201 because at 1201 midnight on the date that you are supposed to be released, that's when they say you are free from the state. Now, depending if you're on probation or parole, mainly parole, because when you get released from prison, it's called parole. So if you're going to be released and you're still going to be on parole, well, you still got a 1201, but you're also still not 100% released. But some people who are getting released from prison get released from doing flat time. That's what they call it. The state sentenced them to 10 years and 10 years flat. There was no way for them to get good time or earn an early release because the state said, hey, look, the judge ordered them flat time. And then a lot of times back in the 90s, guys were getting sentenced to 20 years, 25 years, thinking they were going to do half of that. And when they got up to state, the prison system itself enabled an Act 187, I think it was, I forgot all the acts. 187 is the Good Time Act, but there was a different act that they had in legislation to where if you was a habitual offender, you can get hit with the flat time. And so dudes were getting hit with flat time. So I had to receive the flat time on my current sentence. And I also had parole. They call it consecutive and concurrent. I didn't have a concurrent sentence. I had a consecutive sentence. So when I went back to prison, because I was already on parole, I got a flat time because the legislative act that was in place required me habitual. So I got flattened out. So I had to do my time flat. Plus I had to back up my parole. But my parole was actually good time related. So I only had... It was less than a year on parole because I lost good time. And so it was a real small amount of parole that I had. And I did get out right before Hurricane Katrina. But we're going back to the day that I get released. My parents came pick me up and I was in a halfway house. During my time in the halfway house, I did not save a lot of money, but I did work a particular job, a free world job, because that's what they try to do with you in the halfway house. Like three to 6 months before you get out, they send you to a halfway house so you can assimilate back into society. And what they do is they get you a free world job, whether it's at a restaurant or whatever. Well, I had got this particular position, and it's very interesting how I got this position because the owners of this company that I went work for, they only wanted certain individuals in a certain position. And I happened to go there when there was a transition. The dude who was in a position before me, who was a black dude, he was being released. His sentence was over. He was coming up on his 1201. And they were looking for somebody to fill a position, specifically young and specifically white. He was the only black dude that had that position. And so I got put in that position. And even in the halfway house, they still, people still look at things. And it doesn't, just because people are at the halfway house, inmates, a lot of these dudes are institutionalized, and a lot of them are getting out and they're going to do the same crimes that they've been doing. They're going to go back into the same life that they've been living. They didn't learn nothing in prison except who had more dope and who the connect was and all that stuff. They're going back to do the same thing. So this mentality's still there. Well, I still also have a mentality. I don't want to be involved in crime no more because I changed my life. But my mentality was that I still had to defend myself and I wasn't going to let nobody pick on me. I still was kind of edgy. You know what I mean? I wasn't settled. You know what I mean? So somebody said something wrong to me, I could snap off. You know what I mean? And that's not a good mentality to have going back into society. And that's a mentality that could have landed me back in prison. But the grace of God, and that's a whole nother story. So I'm waiting for my parents, and my parents are the one who come pick me up. My parents live outside of New Orleans, southern part of New Orleans, in the bayou, about 45 minutes from New Orleans. I am in northern Louisiana in a halfway house in Alexandria, Louisiana, where I'm getting released from. They had to drive, come pick me up, and I got released at 1201. But the way the halfway house had it set up, they were like, you could leave at 1201, but they preferred you to leave in the morning. So just get a good night's sleep, wake up and leave. And that's what I did. It was the halfway house. It wasn't. Ain't nobody in prison staying to the next morning unless they have to wait for a bus. Because if you're waiting for a bus ride, then you ain't got no choice because people ain't bringing you to no bus station at midnight. Now, if your family wants to come pick you up from the prison at 12:01, you can get your 12:01 and you can walk out that gate at 12:01. Paper sign, bam, bam, you gone. I'm in the halfway house. Cool, whatever. I wait for my parents to the next day. They get there, they pick me up. The first thing that I did, of course, was give them a hug, tell them I thank them. I don't remember exactly what I was thinking at that very moment, but I had a lot of time over the last few days that led up to that to where I would walk the track and I would think about what I was going to do and I would recollect. I took time to recollect and everything I've been through in the last 6 years in prison and throughout my life and to where I expected my life to go. Now, a lot of people didn't notice, but the time that I spent in prison, I changed my mindset. I wasn't the same person. And listen, I couldn't be upset with my parents for coming to pick me up from prison and not knowing where I stood mentally. Sure, I was telling them I wanted to do this good thing and that good thing, but I had been released before and I went back to the same cycle, the same vicious cycle, and I wound up back in prison. So they're probably thinking to themselves and they're hoping, they're my parents. They're like, we're going to believe in our son, but we don't know. We don't know. It's okay. People don't know what you're going to do when you get out of prison. It's up to you to live a better life. And you can't get upset when people look at you and doubt you when your past and your history has reflected you constantly in and out the system and constantly making the wrong decisions. So you can't be upset. I didn't take that personal. And it wasn't just my parents. I know there was a lot of people. But then I learned there's a difference too between people who aren't certain because of your own actions, which is perfectly fine. I get that because they don't know, how you feel inside, how you change your heart and your mind. They don't know that. They're not inside your body. They don't know that. And so the person that you was is all they know. So they make assumptions that you're going to continue being the person you were. And so that's what a lot of people thought. But then I found out that there's also people who are holding their nuts on you. That's what they said in prison. So forgive my language. They are holding their nuts on you, so to speak, which means in prison terminology, that means that they were hating on you. They want to see you fail. They don't want to see you do better. They're hoping that you're the same old because they're miserable with themselves and they're haters of themselves. So they're going to hate on you. So I experienced both of those things when I got released from prison. I don't know if there was probably a few people that I can think of that maybe thought that I was going to be a better person and trusted that when I got out, this was going to be a changed man. My parents picked me up. On the way home, we wanted to get breakfast. My dad wanted some breakfast. It was a long ride. And I wanted to get breakfast. Where do you want to eat? We stopped at McDonald's. Of course, McDonald's is the highlight for any convict who just spent the last 6 years in prison or any amount of years. The first thing they're thinking about, man, I want to get me one of those McBreakfasts. We went to McDonald's. I got my McMuffin and my big breakfast. And I had me a good cup of coffee. I remember thinking, because I wanted a cup of coffee. At the time that I spent in prison, y'all, I drank my coffee every morning unless I couldn't get coffee because I was in the hole of the dungeon. Other than that, I got my coffee every single morning. I wanted my coffee. I drank my coffee. I woke up before I went work the gun line, before I went work the field or whatever job, because I had other jobs too. I always had my coffee in the morning. Drank coffee in the morning, drank coffee in the evening, drank that coffee. A lot of people in prison drink that coffee. Had my coffee at McDonald's. What else do I want to do? I said, man, you got, I told my mom that you got, it was like still 50 cents, 75 cents. I said, I want to go get me a paper. They had that USA Today. In prison, I always read that newspaper, man. I had that newspaper open like this. You know how it is, man. You're looking at the articles, you going. And I always didn't start with the front article. I say the best for last, so I went to the mediocre articles, you know what I mean? And I love reading the Times-Picayune, which was a Louisiana, New Orleans-based newspaper, and the USA Today. That was my two favorite newspapers that I read. And so I read the USA Today. And while I was reading the USA Today, it was a good feeling. I'm like, I'm free. And this was something that I wanted to do. This was one of the things I envisioned as I, grew in maturity in prison. I didn't want to get out and go get with some random woman and have sex. That wasn't on my mind, man. That's the type of stuff that landed me in prison, that mentality. I wanted to just take a deep breath when I got home from prison. I didn't want to go get a drink and get tore up. I did that the first time. So the second time around, you know what I mean? That wasn't my priorities, right? Those things weren't on the top of my list to do. Now, I was still young when I got out. And so after a few days, I went and had a little bit of fun. But I was very cautious And even as I did it, I began to say, yeah, I'm going to do this for a minute, but I can't be doing this, you know? And so I'm reading my USA Today, and I'm talking to my mom and dad, and my dad's telling me, hey, look, you know, we're going to try to get you set up, you know, because he knew the first thing I needed was a job, and I wanted a job, you know? So I'm like, I got to work. You know, I had no issue with working. Read that paper, USA Today, have my breakfast. It was a long trip from Alexandria, Louisiana to my parents' house. And I had not been. My parents built a home while I was in prison on the bayou. So I hadn't been to that new home yet. You know, I saw pictures of it, but I hadn't been there. And so we finally get back, and we with my mother and my father. My dad's driving. We drive all the way back home. And I remember seeing my parents' house. They showed it to me. My dad said, you're going to stay in this room. They had me an air mattress set up and everything. And in one of the rooms, it was the office, because they had an office. And they set an air mattress up. That was perfectly fine for me, y'all. You know, I didn't need no bed. The air mattress was fine. So I got my air mattress. And then me and my mom, because my dad didn't want to go see nobody else. He just picked me up, so we had to drive back. And then me and my mom went back up front from the bayou, which is all the way up front. You know, that's like a 40-minute drive. So we went home. I got home. They showed me the new house. They might have introduced me to a neighbor or two who they live next to. And then I went up front. And the next thing I did was went to my cousin's house, if I'm remembering right. And it was at my cousin's house where my son came, or if I'm remembering right. And so one of the first things I wanted to do when I got out of prison was connect with my son and my daughter. That was top of my list. You know what I mean? I knew the first thing I was going to do was have my coffee and read the paper, because I knew my kids weren't coming to pick me up because of the circumstances with my children, right? But I knew I was going to see my son first, and because my family was raising my son. And so my son came, and we hung out, and we spent some time together, and he wanted to come sleep over by my parents' house, you know, to hang out with me, which he did. But before I did that, I hung out with my cousin, talked to my aunts, you know what I mean? You know, had a few moments with everybody. It was listen, y'all, it was very anticlimactic. This wasn't like some extraordinary thing, but for me it was. If you listen to this, you're like, oh man, I'm expecting a dude to go party. Nah, man, no. And if that's what you think you're going to do and you want to live like that, that's why you're failing all the time. You got to tone it down, man. You got to tone it down. It's all right to be mundane and take care of things that matter more. And so my goal was to try to, you know, reconcile my relationship with my children, because I had failed up until this point. I was a failure. You know what I mean? I failed both of them. There's no question about it. I was wrong. I had deserted them and went to prison. And when I was out for the little bit of time that I was out, I was an idiot, you know? And so I failed them, you know what I mean? So my goal was to try to reconcile that and try to be a better person to them. And what I learned in life early on, it was a lot easier said and thought than done. You know what I mean? I had to learn that. It was difficult. It's hard. And it's you know, 20 years of being released from prison. It's still not necessarily, it's definitely not the way I would like it to be, but I made peace with the situation, and I've never lied, and I've been honest. I didn't steer, I didn't twist, I didn't manipulate. I was clear and honest in everything I said and my feelings. And I even owned up to my wrongs and apologized. But I remember calling my daughter as well. My son, we hung out, we played football, he was into sports. And he just so happens to have a dad that's terrible at sports, but I do know sports. So we threw the ball, we went shot basketball. It was a basketball goal down the road from my parents' house, and we spent hours and hours doing that. He wore me out. I was swole, you know. So I was in excellent, phenomenal shape. So I mean, I didn't get tired easy, but you know, I still wanted to rest. So when I fell asleep that night, we both crashed out. And I did artwork too. So, I mean, we played ball, we did artwork, we laughed, we talked about Dragon Ball Z. Lord of the Rings was a big thing. He knew I had read The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, so he kept asking me questions on that. I shared all the Lord of the Rings books with him, my thoughts on the movies, because I hadn't seen the movies yet. You know, I was excited to see them. I was in prison, you know what I mean, when those movies started. So I didn't get to see them, so I had to get caught up on the Lord of the Rings movies, because like I said, I was in prison during that arc. And he was all interested in that. But I remember calling my daughter was one of the things I did too. I said, let me call my daughter, because I wanted to get in touch with her as well. And I remember calling her and trying to get in touch with her. And I remember her grandmother had answered the phone, and I said, hey, Miss so-and-so, I don't want to put a name out there. I said, I'm home. I was just calling to check up on my daughter, and she's like, oh, she said, I knew you was coming for her. I knew you was going to come check on her. I knew you was coming for her. You know what I mean? Wanted to be with her. I knew it. I told everybody. And I was like, hey, thank you. She said, she's not here. I'm going to tell him you call. And so me connecting with my daughter wasn't an easy thing. It was difficult, Like I said, people had a perception of who I was, not in the past, not who I was in the moment. And I'm not here to get angry with anybody, like I said, because they knew a different person. But the person that I became over time, I showed people. And it wasn't like gradually, like I came home, I did not get in any trouble since. I did not commit a crime since I've been home from prison. I paid my taxes. I kept a job. You know what I mean? Have I been perfect? Absolutely not. I'm still not perfect, but I'm getting better all the time. And my goal is to become even more mature today than I am yesterday, right? So my first day home, that was pretty much what summed it up. You know what I mean? I didn't have this idea that I was going to go get loaded and go to a club and go get tore up and find some chicks. That's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to relax, get my thoughts together, and make a connection with my children. That was my ultimate goal, and that's what I did. Did it turn out exactly like I wanted it to? No, it didn't turn out exactly like I wanted to. The best thing was my cup of coffee, number 2, and number 1, me and my son really hit it off. We had a good day that first day I was home from prison. I'll never forget it. It's etched in my mind forever. And he was hugging me, playing, all over me and everything. So we had a good time that day. And he stayed with me for like a week, man. He wouldn't leave my side, And, to this day, I believe me and my son have a decent relationship. Could it be better? Sure. A lot of my relationships in life could be better, but we work on them. We don't give up. We pursue and we do the best we can. Sometimes you got to step back, you know what I mean? Because when I came home from prison, my kids were kids. My son's a man. My daughter's a woman, So now, they're their own people, and you got to respect that. Anyway, my first day home from prison was very anticlimactic and uneventful, but I remember it and I'll never forget it. And you know what my dad did my first day home? My dad had connections. He knew a lot of people in the area where I lived. He had me a job before the sun went down, a welding job. Dude said he worked at the shipyard. He started me at a decent pay too. Come to find out, he started me more than what he started anybody else out, like $3 or $4 more than anybody else. So he looked out for me on the strength of my father. And I started doing that job. And I was welding. I was learning how to weld. And I met my wife shortly thereafter, which was, beside finding God and accepting Christ as my Savior, meeting my wife was the next best thing that ever happened to my life. Because the Lord knew I needed somebody who was solid and not wishy-washy, lukewarm or phony. She was real. You know what I mean? Stuck with me through thick and thin, And so that's hard to find. And so I definitely believe there was divine intervention in that, And so here I am all these years later. It's been 20 years since I've been released from prison. I would hope to get a pardon. I've done a lot of things. I've accomplished a lot of things. I've been to a lot of places. I've helped a lot of people. And it ain't no bragging on my own self. It's just a reality on what I did. And there's still a lot left to do. I wish I would have started, there's always regrets. I wish I had a better relationship with certain people. I wish I would have done things sooner. I wish I would have learned things sooner. I wish I wouldn't have made some of the mistakes I made since I've been released. Some of the bad choices I made. On something that's on a mundane level, I wish I would have started this YouTube channel when I first got out of prison, 18, I've been home for 20 years now, but I wish I would have started this channel about 15 years ago. Because obviously I would be much further along, but I am where I'm at. You know what I mean? And I started when I started, and I appreciate it. I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm doing this thing. And so I'm sharing with you for the first time on the Pen and the Shank, the most unusual and unique crime and prison channel experience on YouTube, how it was for me, my first day home from prison. And I understand that you probably watch other videos and there's this grand story. And y'all know one thing, if you watch my channel, I got some grand stories. I tell prison stories unlike anybody in any other channel. I tell you the stories that you just don't hear. Go look at my videos. They got some pretty insane and unique, crazy, insane stories that I tell. But this story that day was not that. It was very, very steady. And I miss my mother and my father to this day. Both of them are gone. But I'll never forget that both of them came to pick me up. And I love both of them. And one good thing I'm going to tell y'all, and I'm being vulnerable with y'all right now, is that throughout my life, before my mother and father passed, I had an opportunity where both of them told me, they said, Greg, we're proud of the man you became. They said, we're proud of the man you became. You became a good man. You know, it meant something to me that they recognized that I became a good man, because that was important to me. And to this day, you don't understand, there's a lot of people who they call me all kind of names to this very day. I guess they think I'm some kind of facade, fake or whatever, but I'm not. You know, I live this thing out. I do my best to be a good man. Not perfect, but good. But to have my mother and father tell me that they appreciate the man I became and that they're proud of me, that meant a lot. That meant a lot to me. And I miss them both, you know. If you got your parents with you, you know, tell them you love them, spend time with them, you know. Don't miss an opportunity to ask those questions that you never asked them. Because when they're gone, they're taking all the information with them. Get the information now about your past. You know what I mean? About stuff you don't know. About your feelings. Get their feelings. Because when they're gone, they're gone. They won't be able to share it, you know. Anyway, thanks for watching. Give me a like and subscribe and hit that bell notification. And prepare. We're going to have a lot of good stuff coming this year. Let's get it.